what does it mean to you when I pose the question of living life as a philosophical journey?
Right. Yeah. For me, it all starts with Socrates historically, and um, this what's called Socratic questioning. Usually, it just people just leave it at that. Socratic questioning is kind of this childlike why, and then the person you ask this to gets annoyed because, of course, he doesn't know at the end why. You know, but then Socrates has two ideas with this Socratic questioning. One of them is to um, to really assume his own unknowing and to see like where it's the knowing of the other person, is it actually foundational, but also because Socrates in Plato's dialogue, Socrates has ideas, but he only would tell these ideas most of the time when someone asks him. But lots of times he would ask another person and they would never ask him back, well, I don't know, but what about you? What do you think about it? But that point of saying, I don't know, what do you think about it? That's actually, I would say, the very start of a philosophical dialogue. And this is the point that Socrates wants us to get to a point where we are mutually open to each other because we know that we don't know. Right? And that's the ultimate Socratic point of knowledge, to know that you don't know. Now, since you've asked about long form research and writing, recently the end of the year, I've been getting into Descartes and Spinoza. So there's a massive shift that occurs with ancient philosophy and then modern philosophy, mediated historically, of course, by Christianity, as we've been exploring in the Christian atheism course. Now, Descartes is also has this point of knowing unknowing, and for Descartes, the name of this is the cogito. So the cogito is this point of unknowing, because it's a point of ultimate doubt. Descartes says that I think, therefore I am. You could just as well say I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. Right? So it's a fundamental doubt that's not, let's say, you are subjectively involved in that. Right? It's not a doubt that you think, okay, maybe it's A, maybe it's B, but who cares? No, it's a doubt that really hinges on your identity hinges on this doubt. You don't know who you are. That's the state of doubt that you are in. It's a type of despair, as Hegel will describe it and will radicalize the Cartesian cogito. Now, so I think that this is a fundamental shift we find from ancient philosophy to modern philosophy. This type of knowing of unknowing in Socrates, and then the knowing of unknowing in the cogito, and knowing thought to be being. Now, to say thought is being, or in other words, I think, therefore I am, this is something that I think is very a very crucial feature of philosophy, because philosophy posits that there is such a thing as truth. Unconditional truth or absolute truth maybe, but truth as such. In the time of Plato, the battleground was against sophists, and the sophists, they claimed, no, well, maybe there's a truth, maybe there's not a truth, but it's not for us to try to resolve these fundamental questions of reality. We can just do rhetoric, and we can learn to become very good at convincing other people of what the truth is, regardless of what the truth really is. Right? But okay, it's more complicated than that. Plato also has a respect for rhetoricians and sophists. Now, in modern philosophy, what emerges is, of course, Humean skepticism, but then also Descartes himself was seen as a skeptic, which is not true. Descartes was very much against skepticism because Descartes didn't want to doubt for the sake of doubt, which is what I would say that's what we could call skepticism. To doubt for the sake of doubt. Philosophy doubts for the sake of truth. And philosophy, modern or ancient, does come to this point that it finds a truth. In Hegel, this variant that Socrates and Descartes had is called absolute knowing, right? Like a self-emptied state that's also absolute certitude. It's self-othering, to put it shortly as we can. Now, this is for Socrates, Descartes, and Hegel in these three variants. These are all the beginnings of philosophy. So they're not the end of philosophical cognition, as you put it, but they are the very start of philosophical cognition, which then sets out to think the differentiation of the facets of ultimate reality. So if that could be metaphysics, ethics, logic, right? So after the phenomenology of spirit with absolute knowing, we get the science of logic, and we get the philosophy of nature, and we get the philosophy of spirit, which are all done from that standpoint, that philosophical standpoint. So what is this today, right? What does it mean to take this and then run with it, take this truth and live with it as to live with it as a life, as a subject? I think everything changed with psychoanalysis. I am tempted. Last weeks I've been tempted to work with the hypothesis that modern philosophy is dead, and that Hegel is the last modern philosopher, and that Hegel killed philosophy. And the truth of that we can see not only in Hegel necessarily, but mostly in what emerges after Hegel. So we get Marx with his focus on class, we get Freud with his focus on sex, Nietzsche on power, Kierkegaard on faith. So you get these highly idiosyncratic specializations occurring within philosophy, but they're not simply specializations as in Nietzsche knows a lot about power and Freud knows a lot about sex. They all, I believe, aim to get at a fundamental fissure in reality itself, right? So sometimes Marx is critiqued because, of course, there's not just two classes in reality. There is like middle classes, and there's many more categories you can make. But Zizek makes the wonderful point that that's besides the point. What's fundamental is that the fact there's never two simply opposed classes is actually what makes up the class war, and is the very discrepancy of, let's say, the economic incoherence or the economic split that determines us so deeply in our capitalist civilization or another civilization, right? So whether we can deduce communism from it, that's another question. But Freud and Lacan get at this fundamental fissure of the subject as regards sexuation, split between men and women, or consciousness versus unconsciousness. And I think today, to live as a philosopher, so to live in a thoughtful manner, we have to realize that we can't go back to ancient philosophy. We can't also go back to modern philosophy, but we have to work with these fundamental fissures in sexuality and in class. These are two that come to the fore for me. Why is that, to finish? Because if we return to let's say what precedes the psychoanalysis and Hegel too, we return to a type of dogmatism. And I would argue that most of these types of dogmatisms, which Kant was already responding to in his day and age, right? He awoke from his own dogmatic slumber, which kind of was this Spinozan / Leibnizian idea of I'm going to systematize the whole, and I'm going to give everything its place and see the fundamental harmony underlying everything. That's both Spinoza and Leibniz to a certain extent. Kant wanted to get rid of this and got to the point of the transcendental apperception, which I don't want to go into that, but what happens when we return to this is that we get forms of political regression. So ultimately, for me, I think, and I can expand on that, but I think philosophy and to live as a philosopher is also a political deed. Thinking is not opposed to deeds, it's itself a political deed. And I think it's highly important to not cover over these fundamental antagonisms of sexuality and class with beautiful ideas. I think maybe this is the greatest danger to philosophy and also to politics today. And we see this happening with many people. I can give an examples, but so this is where I want to start. I think philosophy and being a philosopher is living a political life in thought also.